Welcome to the Way to Go podcast with Eagleville Bible Church. I'm Bill McMinn, along with me, Mark Hostetler. And it's been, I don't know, man.
It's been
what day are we on? I don't even know what day it is. Some days, I don't know how it is with the rest of you guys. There are days, honestly, I don't even know what day I'm on, let alone what the date is. So
January has been a month.
It's been a month, man.
I'll tell you, and I think it's been a month since we've done this. So
more than there's got to be, because we haven't done it since before Christmas. So it's the 27th of January already. So it's probably been over a month since we've done a podcast. We're back. We're back to doing it. It's just Christmas and the holidays, and then we come in basically to tragedy in a lot of ways. So, losing our buddy Steve, and that's been a tough loss, and people have been writing and, commenting on it to me. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? I said, well, it's definitely different. I mean, it's a big adjustment coming to the office in the day, and, he's not here and I'm used to seeing him. I would say, yeah, that's a humongo difference. And it's something that every day you go on, you cry less, but you realize more, because you kind of, he's not here. Like, it deepens, as you, understand like what that means, like, man, it's just different. It's a lot different for me. So.
Yeah, different stages of grief, right? And so we're 2 weeks. You said 2 weeks in at this point, and there is different stages of grief. There's how you process it, and now it's more like, man, the missing aspect is coming in. You know what I mean? Like missing him just being here. And I'm sure everybody watching, everybody listening, you've been through that, and you know how that is. And when you work alongside somebody. I had the pleasure of working with Steve for 5 years, knowing Steve for 6 years, and a lot of people comment on his presence. I understand what they mean, you know, just being around him, you were comfortable. Yeah. And sometimes he rubbed you, he's like, hey, this is pretty, you got to get this right. But more often than not, you were comfortable around him. You know what I'm saying?
No, he was straight shooting.
Yep.
But one thing that I've realized, and something I've never thought about before I just went through this, is you get to a certain age and you have friends you've had for a long time. For Steve, could be 18 years, give or take. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's been a while. I don't really know the year, I ran into him, but he was in my small group for 4 years. Then I turned him loose to teach his own small group. He became a deacon in the church. So for years, he was serving on the board. So I'm the lead pastor at board meetings. He's my one of the main deacons in the church, one of the spiritual leaders of the church. So we're working together as that way. Yeah. Then he became a pastor. Then there were years where we were fishing together and doing stuff even before he became a pastor. So, we knew each other, like I knew him well. Yeah. I would say probably better than most humans, on the planet. And what I've come to understand is, like people say, everyone's replaceable. Yes and no. There are some people you're going to lose in your life that there's no replacement for that person because the math doesn't work. Like you get to a certain age, the math is not going to work. If you've been married 40, 50 years and you lose your spouse, well, you're never going to replace that spouse in the same way as what you have with that person because there's not enough years to do it. And so that's why I look at with Steve. Yeah, it's okay. I just recognize it for what it is. And I think that's just come to terms with reality. I don't have to replace him.
No.
He had a singular place in my heart and life. That's right. And that's okay. You know what I'm saying? And that's something I just have to learn to live with and adjust and appreciate, but understand. Guess what? A lot of people are going through it. We think about Steve, but there's also, one of the guys in our church and one of the ladies, a lady lost a son, her grandson lost his mom, and another, person lost her mom, and then the daughters, lost their grandma. Mm-hmm. So we've got that. It's been going on. Somebody just lost their husband. Someone else just lost their husband. We lost our friend. Erin lost her husband. This is like grief, and the number of deaths that we've had in January of 2022. It's a lot. So we did want to talk about it, handling these kind of things.
Yeah. Because what do you do with that emotion? What do you do with grief, that monster that's looming over top of you? Grief. What do you do with it? How do you process it? I look forward to hearing from you on this.
I keep moving. That's the one thing I do. It's funny. I have like what I call my lean on team. And so someone says, oh, sure, they're leaning on you and you're leaning on them. And I thought, no, my lean on team is for getting stuff done and evaluating decisions that we have to make going forward. If I want to if I want to grieve, I'm just going to go out in the woods. I'm going to go take a hike, and I'm going to think about my buddy. That's how I'm going to handle it. I don't actually feel like I need to like be talking to people about it, or that I need somebody to cry on their shoulder, because as a guy, I'm just going to tend to, I can be alone and be okay. I mean, that first Sunday that I preached, to be honest, I mean, my natural inclination was, and as much as I love the support of the people and love it, I mean, my natural inclination was to be by myself.
Yeah.
That was just the natural way that I would tend to go. I wouldn't tend to go running into the crowd. I would tend to say, no, I think I want to process this and think about it. So for me, that's how I would deal with it. But how we get through these things, first off, is with lots of love. And I know that the love doesn't really change anything. Like, as nice a funeral as we had for Steve, we're not going to physically get him back. As nice service and as many contacts as that Angela Young is going to get, it's not going to bring Larry back.
That's right.
And so we have to realize that, but it still helps. It still helps to salve a wound. I mean, there's a hurt that people are going through, whether it's Aaron, it's Angela, it's was it Martha, it's whoever these people are who have suffered loss. There's a hurt there. And I think of my mom passing just last month. I mean, so we're still in January and December, my mom passed away. Yeah. So, I mean, definitely been through a lot of loss. It's helpful when people show they care.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's helpful.
Yeah, and so it's interesting you brought that up, because I would tend to be the other way. In grief, I tend to, I want to be around people.
Right.
I tend to be somebody that gets strength from people around me, and to be able to comfort them, comfort each other is a better word, through that time. I find good support in that. Now, there are times when I just want to be with Jesus.
Yeah.
And I just want to connect again with him and say, you know what, you were good. I still love you, Lord. And I want to praise you through this time, And so
for me and Steve, we were the same way. We didn't, like when my mom died, I didn't post that first day. And the reason I didn't want to post about it right away was because I just didn't want to deal with a lot of talk about it. Yeah. Because when my mom first passed, honestly, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to say anything about it. I know Steve felt that same way with his mom. Immediately, like the immediate thing is, it hurts to talk about it. Yeah. Like it doesn't feel helpful. It feels like it's hurting you when you're talking about it. So you need that time to get a few days in to just process it. Yeah. For me personally, like I said, I'm happy for the people. I'm happy to be around the people. I'm happy for all the love. I think it's ultra helpful. Right. It's just one of those things where initially my first response is, this hurts me. Like I'm crying about it. Yeah. Like I don't per se need to cry in front of other people. I just like to do that by myself.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
It does make sense. Now, with what you just said, I think it's super important to point out, use discretion when you're posting stuff. I think it's so important, man. If you don't know if word's out yet or whatever, maybe just use discretion and don't post it. Yeah. Don't be the first one to post it. Right. If you're not directly involved there,
It was shocking. Steve's death, I mean, the news of it spread like wildfire. I was going to post in the church the next day. I had to post that night because it was so out there. And I told Aaron, I said, listen, I'm going to have to post it tonight because it's everywhere.
We were trying to be discreet about it. We were trying to, because we didn't know who in the family knew yet.
To this day, I've not posted on my own Facebook wall about Steve, even though I want to. I've not done it. I wanted to get through the funeral first because you have to put so much attention, like all the people commenting. It's hard. I mean, it's you appreciate all the love, but you got to realize, I think that if you're giving love to somebody in grief, you got to realize sometimes they're not going to respond, and don't be offended. It's not personal. They've heard from a bazillion people. Yeah. And it's just very difficult to keep up with all that, because in a social media world, it's different than in the old days where you would just show up at a building and talk to people, or like do what we call the calling hours. Today, when someone passes away, there's the opportunity to endlessly hear from people at all hours of the day. There are people writing, seriously, Erin, I mean, in the middle of the night. And not that she minds it, because sometimes she's awake, but they're awake and they're thinking about it. So they're writing to her, she's awake, she's thinking about it. That, man, that would have never been true before this advent of technology and the internet. And, we're all so connected. It's really a different world. So don't be offended if they don't write back. I think it's always appropriate to say, I love you. I just wrote to somebody's widow today. 2 words, love you. That's it. Love you. That's it. I don't need to say God has a reason. I don't need to preach at you. I don't need to, open up every Bible verse. All you need to know is I love you.
I think there's danger in too many words.
Yeah.
You got to be careful with too many words, right? I think when you point out lots of love, I really feel like, guys, we have to get back to that place where before technology, before this kind of connection at all times kind of thing with people, before that, you had to be connected with the Spirit of God,
right?
And you had to gain strength and love from Him, and don't pass over that process. Don't pass over the opportunity to be like Mary at Jesus's feet and just weep.
Yeah.
And connect with Him and gain your love with Him again.
But that house was full of people when Mary and Martha lost Jesus. Like all the mourners came. Like
lost Lazarus.
Lazarus. I'm sorry. Yeah, when Jesus was coming in, went to see Jesus, lost Lazarus. The house was full of people that were mourning with her. And when Jesus raised that young girl, Jairus' daughter, the house was full of mourners. So I think us surrounding each other and coming in real life terms is a normal thing. I mean, I think we should stand by people, and I think that we should show them love, and we should be there, whether that's for, in the case of some of our gals have lost their husbands, shoveling their driveway, you caulking for Angela, or whatever. I mean, just being there for somebody, praying with them, reading scripture, or hey, I'm here, giving them a hug, whatever it is. I think those are great things. Yeah. But you got to realize there's a whole new thing, and that's technology. Now, for me, did I appreciate hearing from over 100 people about it? I sure did. I absolutely appreciated every message. Yeah. But my one buddy's like, man, I never heard back from you. I'm like, you didn't? I didn't even know. Honestly, I had good friends of mine, right? It was days later till I could even respond to it. Absolutely. And it was nothing personal. It was just, there's so much information. There's so much coming in my way. And there's so much that I'm dealing with at the time, trying to get through it myself, trying to help the church get through it. Yeah. We're in grief. We're giving comfort. Yeah. We're in need of comfort while we're giving comfort. And it's just the way it is in the nature of our job and our ministry and what we do.
Bill, if I could, last year, my old boss had a son who took his life.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I went to his house, and I'm telling you that the feeling in that house was so full of love. And when I walked in there, I could hear the mother and the father wailing in the background, crying. They were weeping so hard. And I walked in, and there was like 2 or 3 people that were cleaning. They were up in the corners. They just had a broom. They were clean. They were doing whatever they could. They were offering waters. They had food out and everything. That's all they were doing, is just trying to practically. They were there. They weren't trying to talk in their ears. They were just there, right. And they were helping. They were like, people were in and out of that house so much, so they were sweeping up after him. Right. It was so beautiful.
Well, you remember Job's friends in the Bible? They sat for 7 days in silence.
Absolutely, man. They
sat for 7 days. They said not one thing. But I think that here's the stuff you can say. I love you. I'm praying for you. I'm hurting with you. I feel your pain. Man, love you guys. That kind of stuff. It's what you want to avoid saying is, well, God has a plan. God has a purpose. Sometimes you're telling a grieving person that they're not ready to hear that. And they don't understand it. It's a tragedy that they're facing, and we're telling them, well, God has a reason, God has a plan, and we're trying to, I don't know what we're trying to do, to be honest with you. I was trained in this kind of stuff, so I kind of know based on training that don't say anything other than give him a hug, tell him you love him, you're praying for him. Yeah. You can share, hey, love that guy, man, what an impact he made on my life, that kind of stuff. But I don't try to, because it's almost like you're dismissing their grief.
Exactly.
Oh, why are you crying? God has a plan. Why are you upset? God has a plan. Not that you're really saying that, but it can come across like that. So I mean, I don't want to hear it. I mean, if my wife dies in an accident today, I don't really want to hear, a bunch of people telling me a bunch of scripture verses. What I'd rather hear is, dang, man, we feel your pain.
Yeah, absolutely. I told the Oasis prayer group last week, I said, guys, there's a time and a place to speak Romans 8:28.
Right.
All things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purposes. I love that verse. There's a lot of comfort in that verse. 2 months after, or 4 months after, but the day of, I mean, to me, it's going to, how is this God's purpose? I had a guy ask me that, Mark, how is this in God's purpose and God's plan? That's hard to answer. You know how I answered it? I don't know.
Right.
But his purposes are far better than mine, and I'm not going to try to figure that out right now.
I also think that, listen, things happen. Like one time I was at a pastor's conference, and these are the elite people in the world speaking to you. And they got up. Now, this was more of an MC person, and there had been a tragedy in the music world, the Christian music world, and somebody's child had been run over at getting ready for like an open house or something like that.
Stephen
and one
Curtis
of the kids,
happened,
one of the kids backed out, ran over the kid. And so they stand up in front and they said, well, God has a reason for everything. And I just cringed, man, when they said it, because I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that God did that on purpose. I think some stuff just happens. It's just a way of it. We make mistakes. We go wrong things. I just watched The River Runner. If you haven't seen it, it's a great movie. It's about a guy who was like whitewater rafting. And sometimes they would say that person got killed because they missed a move. Like they did the wrong thing. They made the wrong technical move in very fierce and fast waters, and it took their life. It wasn't that God sent them out there to make that wrong move. They just did. Yeah. If you go around a corner, a 90-degree corner doing 150 miles an hour and you get killed, you can't say, oh, God had a plan. Right. No, you did it. Yeah. We are going to die. Our bodies are failing from the day we're born. Yeah. Right? I mean, we come to a peak, but I mean, we're in decline, and we've got to realize that sometimes things happen. I mean, people have heart attacks, people have strokes, people have aneurysms, people have accidents, people get cancer. My dad died at 59 years old of cancer. I didn't look at that and say, oh, hey, God, you did that. I look at it and say, this is part of a fallen world. Yep. Every man's appointed to die, every person. We're going to stand before God. Jesus Christ came to give us eternal life. I just looked at the whole process of it rather than looking at the individual incident and saying it's a plan of God. Yeah, the overall plan of God is we're going to be born and we're going to die. Yeah. And Jesus Christ saves us from our sin. That's the plan of God. So when somebody dies or things of ill health, I don't look at it like God's picking on somebody. I just look, no, these are just things that happen. It's genetics. It's the way you're born. It's the system that God created. It's the system in which we live. There are going to be thorns and thistles. We're going to earn our bread by the sweat of our brow. Does God put every thorn and thistle in your way? Not per se. It's just that's the nature of the beast.
I agree with you, Bill. I think the danger we have to watch out for also is don't answer questions that aren't asked.
Right.
Don't try to answer those questions. Wait till they ask. One day they will ask. If you're close enough to that person, one day they are going to talk to you about it. And at that point, then point it back to the truth of God. Make sure you're being sensitive to it, but don't try to preempt a question and just talk about the answer before they're even asking.
And you're going to say, I don't know, because you don't. And it's listen, listen, you guys, I've been preaching about this stuff, whether it was a tsunami years ago. Everyone thinks they have an answer, and they don't. Next session, the next podcast, we will talk about that. And I'm going to give you a great verse in dealing with that. But I said, look, God could have sent it. Could be an aging world. Maybe the devil did it, but I guarantee you this, you don't know.
Yeah.
And unless God sends you an email about it, which I know he's not, you really don't know. And we just have to recognize that our knowledge is very limited. We don't know why things happen. We shouldn't guess. What I believe is God doesn't prevent all bad things from happening. Because I had a guy came up to me, he's all forlorn. Why does God allow this to happen? I said, well, why don't we go back to when there were 4 names on the planet? And it was Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel, and one of them killed the other. And there are only 4 of them that are named. I know there were more, but those are the 4 that are named. And not even then did he stop that. I mean, he talked to Cain about it, and again, he didn't even stop it then. I said, where is there anywhere in history that we have evidence that God's going to stop every speeding bullet or every tragedy? And the fact is there is no such evidence. I mean, I'm not saying he can't intervene and stop it. I'm sure he does at times, but I'm not going to look at these things and say, oh, God, you got a reason. Something's happening. God gets us through it. That's what I believe.
It's
and
God
got them through and gave them Seth after that loss.
That's right. It was a terrifying thought. 2 things. God's sovereign and I have free will.
Right.
That's terrifying to me.
Right.
I'd rather just get me away from my free will and just let God be sovereign and tell me what to do. But it's a delicate dance, and it's amazing.
Right.
It's an amazing doctrine of Scripture that we don't have time to get into right now. But
But we will. In the next
We will,
podcast,
yeah,
we will. And
yeah.
here's where we're at right now. It's okay to grieve. There's a time and place for everything. A season for a time to be born, a time to die.
Yeah.
There's a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance. It's okay to grieve. And for me, if I want to be individual, I can. And if Mark wants to be around other people, everyone gets to process through grief in their own way. What we need to do in times of grief is be loving. We know that needs to be the common denominator of grief, to receive the love of other people, to continue to give love, and to be concerned for other people. That's what our role is. In all things, at all times, it's never wrong to love and to care and to be there for other people.
The word that comes to my mind is in 1 John, I think it is, don't just be loving in word, be loving in deed. Right. And so actions, I don't have to say a thing. How can I come alongside you?
Right.
And what do you need practically? You want me to go grab you some toothpaste? Are you out of toothpaste?
Right.
What do you need around your house? Do you need me to come shovel your driveway? We'll be there, you know. Don't just love in word,
Right. No, I would agree 100%. One of the great things Steve did for me when my mom died, he showed up.
And the ministry of presence is irreplaceable. The ministry of presence.
My brothers, that meant the world to them. My son, myself, it meant a lot to a lot of people that he showed up there. And what it showed to me is that guy really loves you. That's what we need to demonstrate by our presence. And when people are going in times of grief, it's the best thing we could do. We love you guys. We hope that you have a great, blessed, and an awesome week.